This episode of the Citadel Cafe is brought to you by listeners like you. Visit patreon.com/the Citadel Cafe to find out how you can become a patron and help make this show possible. This is the Citadel Cafe, episode number 313 for Wednesday, April 10th, 2019. My name is Joel Duggan, and the Citadel Cafe is where my friends and I hang out to talk about the geeky stuff that we are into. Joining me this week, Mr. Lou Page is back. You can find him at Busy Zombie Lord on all the social media that matters, as well as Zombies Ate My Podcast. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, always a pleasure. Always a fun time to hang out and talk with you, even if we are digging ourselves out from underneath a second winter. Yes, I'm breaking the rules, but I don't care.
Yeah, I'm glad you're breaking these rules, because this has been the big thing here. Is we had nice 70-degree weather, 60-degree weather. All the snow is gone, and I'm on vacation this week. And I was like, oh yay, I'm gonna get to go outside and clean up the leaf piles I missed it in the fall, and I can get the yard ready, I get the garden started. And then it went, no. Here's 6 inches of snow.
And I don't know whether this is commonplace for Maine, but it certainly is for Nova Scotia. And this is the thing that I find so amusing, is like everybody and their dog in social media is complaining and whining and griping. It's like, this is no more of this. Winter is not coming. It's supposed to be spring and blah, 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 blah. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, yes, while it was a tease that I was out for a run on Sunday with a t-shirt on and it was like 12 degrees, then the following day that we have 6 inches of snow on the ground and it's sub-zero temperatures. While that's odd from a 24-hour standpoint, it is not out of the norm for Nova Scotia. I can count, I would lose count the number of times that it has snowed as late as my birthday, which is at the end of this month. So I don't understand why people are acting so surprised. It's a bummer, but it's not like shock and awe. What's going on? There's snow in April. Like, no, this happens all the time. For those of you that don't know, in Nova Scotia, there are several versions of seasons that happen between kind of like March and June. We've got fake spring, which we've had. Second winter, which we're having now. Then we've got real spring, followed by rain, and then maybe summer. All of that happens in roughly 3 or 4 months, and they all have these steady streams of consciousness, all their own. It's a bit wacky. I mean, you're not as far out into the ocean as we are, so do you have the same kind of fluctuations?
It's not unusual for mid-April for us to get a snowstorm, but it usually doesn't last more than like a day. Like, you don't even usually need to shovel it. It usually just, it's a dusting, and you go, oh, okay, tomorrow it'll be 45 and it will melt all this. And that's not what we got this time. This time we actually got out to the point where I had to go get the snowblower out and do the driveway. Yeah. And I was like, this is weird. This is not what I was expecting for mid-April.
Yeah, that's what happened here too, is that we normally will get some snow, but it'll either melt when it hits the ground or it's rained away the very same day. You know, like the snow will start in the morning when it's cold, and then as the day warms up, if it's still, precipitation happening, then it turns to rain and it all gets washed away. I think what is probably frustrating most people is that we had a very, very heavy rainstorm like 2 weeks ago, and it was torrential, but it washed away everything. Like every remnant of winter was just gone.
That's the way we were.
It wasn't warm enough for buds to be on the trees. Like everything is still gray and brown and very much earthy. But to have more snow come down and stay, I think is maybe where people are getting frustrated. But anyway, it's neither here nor there. It's just one of those things that, like, it just, whenever I was on social media this week, it was the only thing anyone was talking about. It's like, when have we all become our parents? Because that's all, that's all they do is check about the weather. And speaking of, my dad got back from wintering in Florida on Friday, so I messaged him the other day. I was like, you're not complaining about how cold it is in Florida now, are you? Because apparently the weather was cooler than normal in Florida this time of year. It's like, here's a tiny violin just for you.
Where in Florida is he? Does he go?
Dad he's not too far from Orlando, so it's kind of like that
okay
area.
All right, because my father is about 2 hours south of Orlando. And he's done nothing but tell me how wonderful the winter's been because it's been about 80 degrees every day.
Yeah, no, they for whatever reason, I think where they were in Florida, it was just the nights were cooler. Like they were complaining they couldn't sit
Yeah.
out on the deck as late as they wanted to, and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
my dad said that basically they stayed in the house at night, but
Mm.
but pretty much during the day, my dad works outside all day. My dad was like, "It's great. I don't even need to turn on the air conditioner in my truck." I'm like, "Thanks, Dad."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, speaking of winter, winter is indeed coming. Next week, we will be switching the Citadel Cafe over to cover the new season and final season of Game of Thrones. So this is your reminder that starting next week, we are going to have a spoiler-filled show. We'll be recapping and talking about each episode as it happens. The season premiere is this Sunday on HBO. Very much looking forward to that, and it should be a lot of fun. It's been a long time. It's been 2 years because of the gap that they put
Yeah,
between season 7 and season 8. So I'm looking forward to get back into it. I recently rewatched season 7 and got myself caught up, which was also a short season. There's only 6 episodes in season 8, I think, and there was only 7 episodes in season 7, if I recall.
yeah.
Very good, but very very short in terms of like a full season. With these spoilers coming, obviously, I'm avoiding all things all the time. I've been even noticing quite a bit that I have to watch, even just scrolling through Instagram. There's a lot of theories or images, and I think images are probably the worst offender when it comes to like memes and just images that you can see something is about Avengers or about Game of Thrones and you can not read it, but an image flashes up and you process that so fast that you can't decide that this is about X before you're finished looking at the image. And so I
Hmm.
find that those are the biggest offenders. And so I've been completely dark on Game of Thrones. I've not watched any of the cast interviews. I've not seen any trailers for season 8. Nothing. One thumbnail on YouTube, and that was it. And even then that wasn't bad. Same
I
thing with
own
Avengers.
I've only watched the initial trailer when they announced season 8 was coming,
Mm,
and I will say, um, there's some things in there, but I wouldn't call anything they show a spoiler. I can't devise anything about what's going to happen in the upcoming season from that trailer,
yeah.
except that maybe all our characters are going to meet together. That's about the extent of what I gathered, and that was something I was expecting anyway.
Well, and that's something they've been leading towards for quite some time, and a lot of that did happen in season 7, even.
It looks like it's going to be even more
Yeah.
in the beginning of season 8, and I'm like, that's great, whatever. I'll watch it Monday because anticipation for this. I don't normally subscribe to HBO, but I just signed up for HBO now for my Roku. So
Nice. Well, and there's some other stuff coming to HBO too. Like they announced a Deadwood movie is
yep.
coming, and all the full cast is back. So there, I mean, there's some other reasons to be on HBO as well. I don't know when Westworld starts up again either, because that's usually that's an HBO
I
property
don't.
too,
I
isn't it?
don't. Yes, it is, and I don't know. I have actually. That's one of the few HBO properties I haven't watched.
Yeah, I feel like they wouldn't put that up against Game of Thrones. I feel like they would probably have that happen after.
I'm guessing that that's going to be their thing. Is that'll probably happen after Game of Thrones because they're going to want it to. And people like me who are just subscribed for Game of Thrones,
Yeah,
they're going to probably
yeah.
try and milk us for another couple of months.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I will be finding other ways to watch because I don't have cable at all. So in Canada, that means I don't have access to HBO at all. I
Do
would.
you do you guys not have HBO now?
Nope. The Bell Telecom company has an unprecedented monopoly, or what's the word I'm looking for? Exclusive deal with
With
HBO in
HBO?
Canada. They are the only company that's allowed to carry it, and the only way that you can get it through Bell is if you already are a cable subscriber, and then you pay for the extra tier to get HBO. I know that Ryan,
Really?
yeah, I know that Ryan Murphy does that. He has cable because of hockey, and they have cable in the house for kids, and him and his wife like to watch stuff, and he will subscribe to HBO the month of Game of Thrones and then like catch up, because when you do that, you can still access back episodes and things, and so he can catch
Yeah.
up on previous seasons and kind of like get a binge watch of HBO. It's like having Netflix for a month, or 2 months,
Yeah.
and then just kind of like watching Game of Thrones when it comes out live, but then also like binging all the stuff that you've missed because you've not had HBO for the year.
Yeah, that's kind of what I said to Erica the other day because I've been on vacation this week. I said, "Hey, I'm going to sign up for HBO this week so that we can get ready for Game of Thrones." And she was like, "That's great." She's like, "Don't they give us like a free month?" I'm like, "Yeah, they give us like 2 weeks for free." I said, "So we'll pay for like a month, maybe two, and then I can cancel it."
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And she was like, "Yep." And she's like, "There's that show." She really likes Bill Hader, and he's got that show Barry that just came that was on HBO last year.
Mm.
And she was like, "We can watch that." And there's some other show. She's like, "I can watch the other show that I wanted to watch." I said, "Yep," and then we'll cancel it. And she was like,
Mm-hmm.
"Yeah, it's not something we really need." So
Yeah, if you remember to cancel it, it's probably worth it. Like in terms of like, you're paying for the content, you're, helping make more good content like Game of Thrones. And if you don't mind me asking, like, what's the cost for 2 months for HBO?
maybe it's about $15 a month.
Oh yeah, so I mean, like you're on par. My Netflix subscription is $14. You know, Now,
Yep.
granted, there's a lot more content on Netflix than there is HBO, but still, I would also argue that the quality of content on HBO would be much higher than most of Netflix. Not all, because I find a lot of the Netflix originals to be quite good, but for the most part, for the sake of getting into Game of Thrones in a way that's not, breaking any rules, and it gives you easy access to watch it on whatever TV you want. Like that to me is affordable, especially if you're a big fan. It's the
Yep.
series finale. Like, it's kind of a big event. Like if you've been following the series, you don't want to miss out. So, but yeah, we will be talking about Game of Thrones and getting into all that next week. But I did receive another tip. Speaking of all these spoilers, from my friend Tom Racine on Facebook, and it wasn't his idea or his note, but he was sharing it for the good of all mankind. He's a big comic fan, always has been, and wanted to share that the toy aisle in your favorite department store is probably full of both Game of Thrones and Avengers spoilers right now. So
Yes, it is.
if you do not want to know what characters are in or not in Avengers, or what, even I find that Lego is a big offender with this, with Star Wars. You'll see bad guys, spaceship, Star Wars Lego set, whatever is now available. And it's like, whoa, but I didn't even know that character was in the film until I saw this toy set. And now I have this really stupid looking version of it in Lego. I mean, I say stupid, but it's like not as cool as the eventual reveal of the ship in the movie, which would have been a cool experience had I not known it was coming. And so this is
Right.
what I mean by images spoiling things, because these are the kind of things like you can walk down the toy aisle, and if you're into comics and you're into Avengers and you recognize characters and you see a toy with a certain, we'll say, accessory or a vehicle or something like that, then that may or may not be in the movie, because sometimes toys, kind of go outside the realm of the film in that way. But it could be, and it could also lead you to think it might be at the movie. So I feel like that kind of stuff, coming out so far ahead of the
Yeah.
film,
I,
it
I,
sucks.
I feel I should warn listeners. A couple weeks ago, in the Discord under Avengers Endgame spoilers in the spoiler chat, I posted a description because somebody leaked a basically a plot synopsis
Oh, okay.
of Avengers Endgame on Reddit, I think it was, or 4chan, and some news outlet picked it up and basically said, "Here's the five key things that are going to happen in this movie. Don't read if you don't want spoiled." I of course read because I don't care about spoilers. I'm not going to spoil anything, but I will say, if don't read what I posted in that chat if you're walking through toy aisles, because just about everything I posted has been almost 90% confirmed by the leaks.
Right, and so that's what I think
So,
is important. And I've been pretty, I don't want to say strict, but I've been reminding people in our Discord chat. We have a lot of fun in there, but a lot of us want to avoid spoilers. So rather than even just deciding whether it is or isn't a spoiler for people, what we decided to do is, like, all talk around Game of Thrones is in the Game of Thrones spoiler chat, and then all talk around Avengers, whether it's spoiler or not, is currently relegated to the spoiler chat
right.
for Avengers Endgame. And that's great, because it means that I can go through my own Discord and not worry about stuff being posted, and those that don't care, like you, can dive into those different places
Yep.
and see what's up. And what's nice about having someone like you in the Discord is that I can be like, hey, I want to talk to people about Game of Thrones or Endgame. and I don't want to go in there and have something assault me and ruin something for me. So what's in the spoiler chat right now? If I pop in there and talk to a few people
Yeah.
for 5 minutes, am I going to
Oh,
regret it?
I put everything in spoiler tags that I posted, but
Right.
you click one of my spoiler tags, you're gonna know the whole plot of the movie.
Well, and see, and this is the thing that I find so amusing about our chat is that some people are just so considerate, of other folks. Like, you're in the spoiler chat room, which I have muted, so I can't even see when there's a new post in there. And then, and then within the spoiler chat, you're using the spoiler tag in Discord to black out your text. I find that funny to no
Well,
end.
when I read the article and it basically said a bunch of stuff, and then like right after I read the article, they posted, I think it was the third trailer for Avengers,
Hmm.
and in the third trailer, if you've read my description and then you see that trailer, it literally confirms like 3 points from the thing I posted,
Right.
and I went, oh, well, this is looking like it's very much going to be what I'm expecting. Okay, cool. And
Yeah.
for me that worked. But I know that not everybody's like me.
Yeah, I
I
decided to
like
avoid even trailers now for Avengers because the two trailers, the teaser trailer, of course, the teasers never say anything, but the latest trailer, because we talked about this a few weeks ago on the show and with Alistair, and it's just a mood trailer. Like the first full trailer for Endgame it didn't reveal any kind of plot other than like Ant-Man is in it, right? Which
yeah
I mean, like you can find that out anywhere. But what I liked about it is that it was just this amp up. It was just this get in the mood for this epic finale to this thing, and it just revealed really nothing. So I'm really looking forward to it, and I think I'm going to be avoiding trailers. No, I mean I'm not going to be shielding my eyes if one happens in the theater, but like if I'm on YouTube and someone's like, "Hey, trailer number 3," nope, I'll just go see it. We can't
yeah
see it. All the tickets are sold out at the moment. So unless you want to go wait in line forever on opening night, then
yeah.
I'm gonna have to wait until Monday.
I'm gonna probably wait 2 weeks before I go see it, just because.
Yeah. Well, if it doesn't matter for you with spoilers, then it's like, well, whatever. You can just go whenever. I would like to go see it before the internet spoils it for me, but I have the advantage of not having to go during the week or sorry, during the weekend. I can take part of my day, maybe even on my birthday on that Monday, and go see it kind of like on a 1 p.m. show where there's
Yeah,
no one around.
the one of the local theaters, they don't do a lot of business on Sundays.
Hmm.
Sunday seems to be their dead day, so they do matinees longer on Sunday. So we usually go on a Sunday.
Nice. Yeah, it seems smart. Well, speaking of movies and television and all that kind of stuff, this week I have been watching more Love, Death, and Robots, but I will not really dive into it too much. I feel like after another 4 to 6 shorts, I don't have anything really profound to say beyond what I said in the last 2 episodes of the Citadel Cafe. And thanks again to both Megan and Tadriel for talking about Love, Death, and Robots with me the last couple of weeks, because I thought the conversations were very, very good. We've had a lot of good feedback from listeners, and the shorts are worth checking out. Like there are some ones that kind of make you roll your eyes, and some stuff that's a little bit too violent, but there's also some diamonds in the rough, we'll say. So
Yeah.
I ended up watching The Dump, Shapeshifters, Helping Hand, Fish Night, Lucky 13, and Zima Blue. All of them are good. Like nothing was bad. But one thing I will say that really stood out just from the surface was that Helping Hand was terrifying, and
Yes.
and it was done very, very well. It's a female lead character. She's a space mechanic, and something goes wrong. There's an accident, and she has to get herself back into a spaceship, and in doing so she has to make some very, very hard choices. And even though it's CG animation, the sound in space, the way that they handled the sound, and the acting of the voice acting and the character acting was so
Mm-hmm.
good that I was like cringing in my
Oh
chair
yeah.
when she goes through what she has to go through. It was very, very well done. And the other one that I wanted to point out was Lucky 13, and that Tadriel and I last week had just mentioned that it seemed to be a bit of a whitewash. Like there's a lot of like white
Yeah.
male leads, and there are more of those in the upcoming, in all the shorts that I mentioned. However, in Lucky 13, the lead is an African American female, She's a fighter pilot. She's a drop ship pilot. It's a sci-fi thing, so she's not playing a plane, but she's flying a ship. And Lucky 13 is the name of her ship, and the short is as much about the ship as it is about her. But it's she's very well represented. It's an excellent story. It's all from her perspective. She's not sexualized. It's respectful and a good story in terms of just her experience and what she's trying to communicate with you, the viewer. And I
Yeah.
thought that was worth pointing out. That specifically because we had noticed last week about how kind of like white male centric a lot of the shorts were, and
Mhm.
this went the other way, and I thought that that was worth pointing out.
Lucky 13 was also the one that when I finished watching it, I was like, gee, I really kind of wish there was more going on in this universe. I wish that
Yes,
they would come back to this story and tell me what the hell's going on here, because this seems more interesting than a majority of the other shorts.
yeah, that was the second one. I think it was Suits, the one with the farmers and the bugs that
Yeah.
attack were, and both that one. So for Suits and Lucky 13, I walked away going like, this was really compelling. I would play this video game. You know, like
Yeah.
because I mean, a lot of them do feel like video game trailers, but that Lucky 13, like that sounds, as a military shooter, kind of like Mass Effect type of game.
Right.
With if all the characters, like, can you imagine if you're playing a video game and the pilot character, the person that drops you off for all of your missions, is this woman from Lucky? Is this woman from the
Right.
the Lucky 13? And unfortunately, they don't really give. If they give her name, it quickly transitions to her. They give her a call sign, so they call her
Yeah.
like Combat or Monkey Wrencher. I can't remember. They all have funny call signs, and I don't remember what hers is because they don't use her name very often after that.
Well, she's the one narrating the story, so you don't get she doesn't she talks about herself in first person so much you
Right.
kind of forget her name.
Yeah, it's only her mechanic and her gunner that calls her by her first name. Is like, hey, Captain or Lieutenant, whatever, and they give her last name. But then after that, they call her, Upchuck or
Yeah.
Bullet Fast or like what Bullet. Wow, that was a terrible name. But like they give her the call sign, and that's kind of like all you ever see from or hear from that point out. Um, but like if you were playing a game where she was a character in it, like it'd be one of those things where like if that character ever died because of a decision that you made in the game, you like it's one of those story points where like you go left
Right.
or right, and if you go left then she dies, and if you go right then she survives. I would be sad. Like as that would affect me, from a story perspective. If after several jumps with this female dropship pilot, where she said she had this kind of character and this kind of rapport with you, that if she didn't make it, like I would be upset. So they really did an excellent job of communicating to you the feeling, the story, the character, the um, load, the responsibility that she had to flying all these missions. And not once do you really look at that and go, "Oh wow, that's really cool animation." Like the story takes precedent. Everything looks cool, but you're not sitting there going like, "Wow, this looks amazing" the whole time. Like it's not all eye candy for eye candy's sake, which a lot of them are, the shorts.
Mhm.
So I thought that was really well done. But I mean I've talked about this at length, but I know you've been watching and you've seen either most or all of these. So what
I've seen all of
so
them.
what did you think about going through Love, Death and
uh,
Robots?
I felt the first half laid heavily on nudity and taking you by surprise with it and over
Shock factor.
sexualized tones,
Yeah.
and I kind of was like, okay, it wasn't my favorite. And then some of the later ones that I thought seemed more kiddie. There is a Hitler one that's a comedy,
Oh, I haven't
and
I haven't gotten that far yet.
you haven't gotten to it yet. I will say now, it's basically like there's this. It basically the premise is there's a computer program that shows you how history could have been changed if Hitler had died at different points in history.
Right.
And the first two are really funny, and you're like, oh, this is cute. I like this. This is funny. And then after about the third one, they get more and more ridiculous, but not in a way that makes any sense whatsoever. And one of them goes super hypersexualized, and you go, okay, all right, I could have gone without this.
Mm-hmm.
It literally takes away from the joke. You stop thinking it's funny and going, oh, somebody thought that they were trying to be South Park. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And I find too that a lot of times the over sexualized or the nudity or whatever. It doesn't serve the story. Like, we're doing it because we've been given the green light that it can happen. And it's like, just because you're allowed doesn't mean that you have to do it. You know,
Right. Like, okay. So you saw Shapeshifters.
yes.
I didn't mind the story. The story made sense. But and the character obviously is going to shape change, and I understand if you're going to see nudity, but they intentionally made a point of, hey, we're going to dwell on the fact he's naked as he shape changes, like
Mm-hmm.
every time he shape changes. And I was like, okay, I get it, but you've shown him shape change like 3 times now. You can cut to something else. You don't have to show me the change every single time.
Not to mention that, I mean, like, it wouldn't be that hard to have him shape change through clothes. You know, like, I mean,
Right, and show the clothes fall to the ground or something.
it doesn't, you know, it doesn't serve the purpose, right? Like,
Right.
it showing it is like, I mean, at the same time, I mean, I think that the more disturbing stuff about the shape changing thing in Shapeshifters was when, and it's not the first time I've seen it. I think Van Helsing did this too. But the man doesn't change into a werewolf. The werewolf rips
Well,
off the man. Like, it's like he
right,
comes out from inside. It's very magical as opposed to more of a scientific or physiological change.
right.
It's got a lot more magic to it, and I also found that was really unnecessarily gory. Um,
Yes.
I appreciated the brevity of the fights. Like, it's one of those things where, like, when a wolf bites your arm and rips off most of the muscle, well, that's the end of the fight. Like, and so I like that. Like, I like that there wasn't a lot of clawing and biting and stuff like that where it just goes on forever. You know, like,
Right.
it feels like a Mortal Kombat match at that point where people are having these crazy fatal wounds, but yet they keep on going. And this was the opposite. Like, when these wolves get into it, it's like samurai fights. It's like whoosh whoosh, and then somebody loses a head, and that's the end. Like, it just, you know,
Yeah.
it was very efficient, but also just grotesque, like, to the point where I just didn't need to see it, and I didn't really like the ending. I like the way that I like the premise, which is basically an outline for racism. It's like there's two
Right.
werewolves in the army, and all the army folks. I mean, and the werewolves are white dudes, but because they're werewolves and people know that they're werewolves, all the other army people are being assholes to them. They're being,
Yeah,
you
they're
know.
treated like second class
Yeah,
citizens. Yeah.
exactly. Well, like dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it made sense, and it was a good. It was a nice thing to point out, and it was nice to see that, um, like, all the characters, or at least most of the characters that I recall, were all Caucasian. So it was
Right.
Caucasian people treating other Caucasian characters that were werewolves like second class characters, but there was no surface level differences, right? It was only when
Right.
one of them was a werewolf that you'd ever be able to tell the difference, right?
Right.
So I thought that was an excellent point, but I didn't understand the wrap up. Like, I didn't understand it. Just at the end
Yeah.
of that
The ending
short,
was.
there wasn't a lot of dialogue, and it just kind of like, you guys had a really cool idea, but you had no idea how to end it.
Yeah.
Is what I got out of it. But
Yeah. My personal favorite is Zima Blue.
really interesting.
I love the art style. I was a huge fan of the Max comics in the '90s,
Mm-hmm.
and that art style just screams Max to me.
Oh, it
It's
does.
kind
Yep.
of shaded the same way. It's very, very, very much like the Max, and I think that I liked the story itself, but I think the art style is what did it for me.
It was an interesting story. It did not go where I thought it was going to go, and that to me stood out as a nice art piece. Like, it was
Yeah.
more about testing animation and pushing the medium to make a statement and tell a story, not to go super graphic or super hyper real or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
it didn't need to be hyper real to tell the story, and I think that that's kind of a fun place for animation to sit. So, but what else have you been watching?
Okay. I mentioned this, I think, in the Christmas when we did the Christmas special. Um, I've been watching The Rookie, with Nathan Fillion as a 50-something guy who decides to join the LAPD. And they're approaching their season finale. I think it's next week or the week after. And I have to just say, this has been the highlight of my week. it shows up on my Hulu on Wednesdays, and every Wednesday night, Erica goes, "Okay, dinner and Rookie," and I'm like, "Okay," and I don't do that for any show. And this show has kept me being like, "Okay, I can't wait to watch this week's episode." Um, it's a it's a cop drama told from the perspective of three rookies that are joining the LAPD. The main character is Nathan Fillion, who is like a guy in his 50s whose son's leaving for college. His wife has divorced him, and they're in the process of like selling their home. And he's in the local bank, and he lives in like the middle of Wisconsin somewhere. And he's a bank robber comes into the bank, and he de-escalates the situation and manages to get everybody out alive. And afterwards, he decides, after his brush with death, that he wants to be a police officer, and so he moves to LA and joins the LAPD. And this is supposed to be his gig as like he has to spend a year riding around with a probationary officer who basically grades you every week on how well you did. And the first thing his commanding officer, the lieutenant in charge, says is, "We don't need anybody going through their midlife crisis here." And they immediately like single him out, and they dwell on him twice as hard as everybody else because they're trying to drum him out.
Right. Yeah.
And he's like, and his point of view is, "Go ahead. That just makes me want to do this more."
Yeah, because and the perspective I'm guessing from the younger cops is like he's old and slow and probably going to get somebody killed, right?
Yes. And they don't spend a lot of stuff on the cop's personal life. It's really about the day-to-day job. They do an episode where his son comes to town because his son's on like spring break.
Right.
And his son comes to town and sees his dad getting like as a cop, and it's kind of like, "Dad, I'm not sure I like this." And he's like, "Sorry, son, this is what I want to do with the rest of my life. And, you're going to have to deal with it." He's like, "Yeah, but I heard the radio today about the shootout. Were you there?" And he's like, "Maybe." And his son's like, "Can we make a deal? At the end of your shift, you just send me a text to let me know you made it home okay?" And he's like, "I can do that." And like, that's the extent of like his son in the episode.
And that's like, a fun role reversal too, right?
Right. And they do this thing where he's like on break from from being on duty, and he's picking his son up at the airport who comes in, and he's locked his keys in the car, and so he's got one of those Slim Jim things, and he's basically unlocking the car, and he explains to the officer who stops him in the parking lot, "I'm with the LAPD." And the guy's like, "Sure you are. I've heard that one before." He's like, "No, really, I'm a rookie with the PD." And he's like, "Yeah, like anybody would hire somebody, like the LAPD has a rookie your age." He's like, "Really, I do." And then the next scene is him going into the station, and they're like, "So he had to call your commanding officer?" And he's like, yeah, "I'm going to get picked on about this, aren't I?" And he's like, yeah, you are. And like, but for every episode it does that. It does like half the episode from their body cam.
Oh, really?
Like you see like there's a scene where Fillion is chasing a suspect, and they cut to his body cam, and he it shows him climbing over the fence from his body cam. So you get to see things from both the criminal perspective and the body cam perspective, which is something it is really interesting. And it takes you kind of out of the story. You go, "Oh, wait a minute, I can totally see where they're going with this." And every episode is not like, "Oh my God," some episodes there's a shootout. Some episodes it's literally like they go to a domestic violence disturbance case, and they resolve the disturbance, but the lady doesn't want to press charges about her husband, and the training officer tells him, "We'll be back here." And he's like, "Can't we do something about this?" She's like, "We can't. She didn't want to press charges. We'll be back here." And then like the end of the episode, their last call, like a week later, is them going back to the same house. And it just kind of lets you see things from a different perspective.
Nice. Sounds like good writing.
And it doesn't make the cops look like heroes all the time, but it doesn't always make them look like villains either, like some things does. It's very neutral in its storytelling.
That's really cool. Do they portray Fillion as over 50 in the show?
And they portray him as late 40s, early 50s.
Okay, yeah, because I realized earlier that I might have suggested that Nathan Fillion was old. He's not. He's only 48. So
Yeah.
I was because you don't usually see actors, playing older characters. Like you don't hire someone that's 48 and say that you're playing a 55-year-old. Like that's normally not the case.
They portray that he is like almost 50.
Right. Yeah. Well,
And
he
that
is.
this
I
is
mean, in real life,
right.
yeah.
And they kind of, then he's constantly joked about it. And the one aspect of it that I really appreciate is they start out all picking on him and not wanting to work with him.
Nice.
And by the end of the season, like everybody respects him.
Nice.
And even the guy that's like the lieutenant that doesn't like him is like, they end up having to go on patrol together, and he ends up saving Nolan's life. The main character, Nathan Fillion's character's name is Nolan. He ends up, the commanding officer ends up saving him, and then later in the episode, he ends up saving the commander's life. And he's like, one of the other rookies might have left me in that situation. And he's like, yeah, they would have, but I know better. And and there's just this aspect of like, it's a fish out of water story, and it's also, you're never too old to change your job. You're never too old to learn something. Life, changing direction in life can happen at any age.
It sounds good, and it sounds. I mean, Fillion's a good actor. He's charismatic. He's funny. Does it have some lighter tones? Like I imagine there's.
It's very. They do it. There's 3 rookie cops, and he's one. Then there is a Asian girl who's trying to become a police officer, and then there's a young guy whose dad is like the head of the internal affairs department, and like each one of them approaches the situation from a different perspective. Nolan is trying to overcome the fact that he's an old guy, and the young guy is trying to live in his father's shadow, who had like the best record of everybody in the police department, and he's trying to come to terms with, maybe I don't need to be the best like my father is. Maybe I just need to be a cop. And the girl is the total opposite. Her parents didn't want her to become a cop because they were immigrants, and they think that cops make everything worse for immigrants.
Right.
And her father also is a psychologist, and he thinks that basically there's a mental point of view to all of this that the cops don't take into consideration. And so they're all trying to live up to a different aspect of what's going on in real life, and they approach it with comedy. They also approach it with some seriousness, and some episodes are more serious than others. Some episodes are downright borderlining on comedy.
Cool. No, I mean it sounds. I mean, again, it's one of those things that I wouldn't necessarily seek out on my own. But if it's on cable and accessible to people, then it sounds like a good watch. It's the kind of thing that I might, look up in the summer when there's not a lot going on.
I'm sure it's going to show up on Netflix once the season's over.
Well, Netflix Canada maybe next. If you're in the U.S., more than likely. But I find
it's an ABC show here in the U.S.
So that might end up. I mean, I'm not seeing a lot of ABC crossover right now with Netflix in Canada. I think a lot of it's going the way of the Disney streaming service, whatever whenever that's going to come out. But we'll see. I mean, I like Fillion. I mean, I remember seeing the trailers for the show, and of course talking with you about it at our Christmas special, and wanting to check it out. But it's one of those things I haven't had time. For me, this week I have been watching a Netflix original, and it's going to be very familiar for anybody that enjoys the BBC nature documentaries that are usually narrated by David Attenborough. This is called Our Planet. It is a David Attenborough production, or at least narrated by him. I believe he's in production staff as well. But it's Netflix original. It's not BBC. It's original Netflix documentary series. And if you enjoy that kind of stuff, then you're not going to be surprised. I mean, like Attenborough has a very specific tone when he narrates things. It's very slow. It's very methodical. Very few words, but a lot of it kind of focuses on the same thing. There's a couple episodes where they focus an awful lot on birds, which are not necessarily the most interesting, animals to follow around. But Attenborough is a bird enthusiast, so you kind of get that influence and stuff in there too. And there is some comedy and stuff in it, which I find kind of funny. Some of the little anecdotes that he drops are actually quite amusing. what I do think is an absolute must see for everyone regarding this documentary series is the absolutely extraordinary cinematography. I am very sad that I'm not watching this on a larger television at like 1080p, or if you've got it 4K, because my goodness, it is just breathtaking. The kind of shots that they're able to get with like steady cams and gimbal cams and drone shots, and like there is footage of a kilometer of ice breaking off a glacier that is just jaw dropping.
Mm.
Like, I mean, on top of that, there's all kinds of other stuff. And I almost don't want to spoil it. It sounds like a silly thing to say you're spoiling things about a documentary series, but there is an opening chase scene. I will leave the details of it out in, I want to say, the 5th episode. It's whatever the grasslands desert episode is, whichever that is, 5 or 6. And it is just stunning to the point where you're watching it and you're floored by the beauty and the just majesty of these animals. But then you're also wondering, how the hell did they do this? Like, how did you get this long of an uncut shot, of this event? Like, how many days were you waiting for this to happen before you actually got this shot? Like, it's just phenomenal.
I will be honest, I have not watched nature documentaries since I was probably 20.
Oh man.
So I've seen the clips for this on Netflix. I've even added it to my queue list, but I'm like, I don't know when I'm going to be in the mood for this.
So the good news is that they're relatively short because they're not meant for TV. They're a little bit shorter episodes. They're more like 40 minutes, 50 minutes.
Okay.
Sometimes the one for TV, they kind of drag out. Like you'll end up with like 13 or 14 episodes because it's meant to be a television series or season. And so then you'll end up with like a 45-minute episode about gorillas where you really only needed 25 minutes, right?
Right.
This has a different focus than most. I mean, first, before I get into that, I would recommend Planet Earth. Planet Earth and Planet Earth 2 are both phenomenal. Also for the same sort of reasons, like the extraordinary cinematography, the color, and the variety of life that they cover on those documentaries is just breathtaking. Those were BBC.
Yeah.
But this one,
I think they're also on Netflix or Hulu here in the States.
Most of them are on Netflix here in Canada because of the BBC in Canada having a shared copyright sort of relationship.
It might, or it could be Amazon because those are the three I use primarily. So I know I've seen them on one of those three.
I would look to see where most of your BBC content probably is in the States, and that's more than likely where you're going to find Planet Earth. There's also a number of other different documentary series that have all come from BBC that Attenborough has produced that are of similar ilk. Like they might focus on like baby animals, or they might focus on. There was one that was specifically about Africa. I don't know if that was David Attenborough. I think that might have been somebody else. But there was one that was just about Africa, just that one continent. And that was really, really interesting. But what's interesting about this particular series is that while it does celebrate nature and animals and all this kind of cool stuff, it has a very heavy focus and a very informative focus on conservation, the lack thereof, and what's changed about the earth and about climate change in the last 10, 20, 50 years. And some of I don't remember them off the top of my head, so I'm not going to even attempt to repeat them here, but some of the statistics that they mention are staggering in terms of like, you think like, oh, this rainforest is now smaller than it used to be, and you think like, and this is where the grave voice comes in and says like, the rainforest is 30% smaller than it was 20 years ago or something like that. But in most cases, when they're stating these facts, they're usually talking about the last 10 to 20 years, and the statistic is usually a drop of like 60+%. So
really,
yeah. And I'm not talking about just rainforest. I'm talking about anything. There's one thing that I do remember, and that's the population of tigers, I think in India, or just tigers worldwide, has dropped by 95%.
Wow.
And I don't remember the year. I don't remember the span at which that happens. But like, we are talking like there, and they use another term a lot too. I mean, there's endangered, but now there's highly endangered. And I feel like, I don't know this for sure. I'd have to look this up. I feel like it's another designation. Like some animals now, some groups of animals are so endangered that they're highly endangered. And I know this. I know things are bad. Like it's one of those things where like everybody knows that climate change is happening and everybody should try to do their best to, recycle and use green energy. And there's all these things that we can and should be doing. And you know that it's important, but for whatever reason, this particular documentary series puts it in a way that just seems to be urgent. Like it really, it gives you the numbers, it gives you the visuals, and says like the reason why this particular beach has got 3 million birds on it is because they have nowhere else to go. And while it's a cool spectacle, it's not meant to be like this way. And here's the issues that come with this many birds being in one spot. They focus a lot about, ecosystems in terms of like, hey, otters and sea urchins and large sea kelp have a very symbiotic relationship. If the otters can't live, then they can't, near the sea kelp, then they can't eat the sea urchins. And if they can't eat the sea urchins actually eat and destroy all the kelp. Like it's one of these things where like, the predators eat the grazers and the grazers eat the plants. But if there's no one to eat the grazers, then the plants die, right? Because
Right.
the grazers just get too successful. And it's something like a sea urchin, they spread across the ocean floor like a plague, right? So
Right.
there's these really interesting symbiotic relationships that they point out in the series. And it's not all doom and gloom. That's something else I really enjoyed about it too. Now I haven't finished it all. I was joking with my friend Sarah, who's a big nature lover, especially big cats. And I'm saying like, I'm trying not to binge watch this series, but I discovered it 48 hours ago and I've already watched like six. Like 6 hours, like it's been like breakfast, lunch, and dinner break has been just like an hour of this show. But it's just so good. And one of the things that they do, they will point out is positive things. Like it's got a message of hope underneath it. It's not all doom and gloom. It's not like we are absolutely screwed no matter what we do, which isn't motivating, right? Like when you say like
Right.
if we're all going to hell in a handbasket, you might as well go together. Like there's no motivation for change there. But
Right.
when Attenborough comes on and tells you that because of conservation and because that in the Philippines, I don't remember where this is, a certain area, a certain island chain that used to be a fishing camp specifically for fishing sharks has now become a protected area where you cannot fish there, has become a nursery for sharks because they can breed and live there without the worry of being hunted by men. Uh, that trickle down effect has affected the local fishery in that there is now more fish in the sea outside of the protected area, in that the fishermen can fish it without fishing it out.
Right.
They're not going to reduce because of the healthy ecosystem established by protecting this area. Now it's a large area, but it's again like the sharks eat the smaller fish. The smaller fish don't eat the coral and the plants, so everything kind of balances out. And so these medium fish that are too big for the sharks to eat end up flourishing. Well, who eats the medium fish? We do, right? So,
Right.
because the little ones aren't worth our time, they're like sardines and like that kind of stuff. So when I'm talking sharks, I'm talking like reef sharks, the things that are only like 4 foot, 5 foot long, and so not anything that would eat like a seal or a man or anything like that. So like they illustrate that like these fishermen probably took a long, they didn't really get into the details, but you can imagine that the fisheries around that area were like, whoa, what do you mean you don't want us to fish here anymore? This is our livelihood. How are we going to feed our families? When the scientists are just like, no, give it some time. If we protect the area now, in 10 years, you won't be able to fish enough to catch everything. And that's what's happening. And so the message is like, we have to start protecting these areas, because if we protect, 50 or 60% of our coastal seas, then that means the other areas that are not protected and allowed to be commercially fished will have so many fish in them. With proper monitoring, we can fish them readily and not have a negative effect, because there's always going to be that safe place for fish to breed and spawn and just make more fish.
Right.
And it's an excellent message. And it's, I mean, it's, I'm using the seas because that's probably the most recent one that I've watched. But there's a message like that across different, whether it's the plains, whether it's jungles, rainforests. There's all these different messages, and it's pretty straightforward. And there's a website called OurPlanet.com, and there's a bunch of other mini documentaries there that kind of point interested viewers in the general direction of like what we can do as a society to follow this path. Like we can see the solution is clear. Stop doing the bad stuff. Stop conserving the stuff. Start conserving the things that we want to conserve, and kind of move on from there. And so I like the message. I like that it's not all doom and gloom, but boy, does it hammer home the dire situation. And like, in the last, like I said, the last several years, the tiger population in the wild has dropped by 95%. I mean, that mean there's a good chance that a lot of these animals, if nothing is done, they're going to be gone within our lifetime. Like before you and I kick it, a lot of these species are just not going to be around. And not only just species, but also in just environmental stuff. Glaciers. There was a big part of the documentary that was focusing on ice and water and all that kind of stuff. And in a country where I don't know if all of the provinces have signed on. I'm pretty sure there's still a few that unfortunately have not. But in Canada, we have a carbon tax, or we will have a carbon tax. And I did not research this before the show, but I have been trying to keep tabs on it. Essentially, it means that if you are not keeping up with environmental standards, then the government is going to tax you. And I'm all for it, because it generally the companies that are large enough to have a huge environmental impact, if they are not sticking to environmental standards, can also afford the fine. So if you can afford the fine, then you can afford the infrastructure to switch over to solar panels, or like whatever it is that you need to do, that in the long run will be better for not just you, it's better for the economy, it's going to be better for you in the long run. There's just no reason to do it now outside of your own short-term greed. So the government is basically saying like, we're going to, prey on your greed and be like, all right, well, if money is the only way to get through to you, then here's the carbon tax. Deal with it, suckers. And unfortunately, though, I think that it has to be both agreed to by the provincial and the federal government. So not all provinces are agreed to it. But it's the kind of thing, it's those kind of steps, it's that kind of hardball that I think society has to start playing. Like the people in charge have to start making these kind of decisions, and the people that vote for those people have to start looking at those platforms and saying like, well, you might be my preferred, governing body, or this is kind of where my, I'm not sure what kind of, my political loyalties lie, or my political views lie, but you've got a crap environmental plan. Like I really feel like the environmental plan needs to be up high on people's priority lists, not at the detriment of your own, well-being. If the person with the best environmental plan also has absolutely no idea how to implement it, and they're going to be terrible for, your livelihood and your economy and the livelihood of your country, then sure, that's a bad idea. Like there has to be a balance. But I feel like the environmental, focus going forward needs to have a spotlight shone on it even more so than it is now. It's a fantastic documentary. Like I can't recommend it highly enough for people. And also it's so pretty. It's, as an artist and someone that likes, cinematography and stuff like that, it's just beautiful.
It's definitely on my list. So you've probably bumped it up a few more notches on my queue now. So
good to hear. Good to hear. Well, I guess we can kind of wrap it up there. We don't have, I don't have much more to say about that. I feel like I was kind of on my soapbox for a little bit there, but I really appreciate the people that tune in every week, especially those folks over at Patreon. If you are someone that likes to support independent podcasting, you can do that for this show over at patreon.com/the Citadel Cafe. We are currently sitting at 16 patrons, which is, I believe, the same as March. So we're still trying to get our new patron for April. I always try to grab one new patron per month rolling forward. So we're looking for patron number 17 for the month of April. Maybe that's you. Who knows? One of the benefits of joining the Patreon is that you can hang out with us in the Discord that we mentioned earlier, talking about Game of Thrones when it happens, talking about Avengers once everybody sees it. There are spoiler rooms. There are other rooms that are just fun for things like Lego and things like Minecraft and stuff like that. Another benefit to being a patron are the barista cuts. These are bonus episodes that I record with some of the guests. We talk about anything from a deep dive on a potential television show to a movie, maybe some spoilers if we can get to them. Or like Lou and I today, we're going to be talking about some video games, maybe some spring video game sales that are coming your way. So if that's the kind of thing that interests you, then check that out at patreon.com/the Citadel Cafe. And again, if you enjoy the show and you get some value out of it, then maybe consider putting some value back in. The email for the show, if you've got thoughts on Love, Death, and Robots, about The Rookie, about any of the upcoming stuff that we have, then email us at thecitadelcafe@gmail.com. You can also find us by name on Twitter and Facebook. Of course, show notes and links to all these things are at thecitadelcafe.com. Music for the show was composed by Kevin MacLeod. We are available wherever you can find a podcast, so just look us up by name and we'll come down your RSS feed with no problems there. My name is Joel Duggan. Everything that you can find about me is at joelduggan.com. It's pretty easy. Links to social media, links to other podcasts that I do, like the Spawn Chunks, which is all about Minecraft, and links to my YouTube and my Twitch page. I'm going to throw people in that direction because I've been doing a lot of video content lately. So if you like Minecraft, if you like video games, if you like just overall art streams, I do art stuff, of course, on Twitch as well. So just check that out. It's all at joelduggan.com. Luke, where can people find you and all the cool stuff that you're doing online?
Easiest place to find me is on all social media under the name Busy Zombie Lord. Last week on Zombies Ate My Podcast, we discussed the J.J. Abrams produced zombie World War II movie Overlord. So if you're interested in Overlord, listen to what we had to say about it. We had a really nice chat about it.
I remember that you were very excited about that film, so I'm looking forward to that.
It's good. It's very good.
You've been listening to the Citadel Cafe, where we are fast, easy, and cheap, but you can only pick two.